Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Cropper here. Let's do a comment on my video about Jordan Peterson being a frontman for A New Dark Age. And Sherry Campbell has left a comment. Can you provide a resource for your claims about our founding fathers? Now I'm going to do this piece by piece. I'll just keep going back. Although there was no intention to create a Christian country, the vast majority were Christian, and with a few deists and 2 Unitarians. All believed in a higher power. We'll get to this. The God mentioned in the Declaration of Independence is not connected with any particular faith, and is purposely not mentioned at all in the Constitution. The separation of church and state was to prevent a state religion and to allow citizens to worship freely as they pleased, or not at all. Well, that's an interesting last little bit there, isn't it? It's true that we're allowed to not worship at all if we so please. But that would be odd if all of the founding fathers were believers. They must have not been believers on some level and wanted to allow our society to grow in that direction. Or they would have set up some sort of a system which allowed it to be a believers' society. Why would they not just be forthright with their beliefs and say, there's not a God, let's get real, guys? Well, first of all, Thomas Jefferson tried to get rid of slavery, and we know how that went. It just did not go. And it happened again. It happened, 70 years later. But it didn't happen at the time. And the religious thing, you want to know why they couldn't set up a state explicitly anti-religious, or why they couldn't be anti-religious? Because think of what was happening at the time. Somebody sent a letter to Thomas Jefferson. If you know Christopher Hitchens, Sherry, you know Peter Hitchens, you say. You say you like Christopher but like Hitch's brother better. If you know about him, you probably know about the letter that was sent by the Congregationalists of Danbury, Connecticut to President Jefferson. And they said, please help us, we're being persecuted. And do you know who was persecuting the Congregationalists of Danbury, Connecticut? It was not atheists, and it was not Muslims, and it wasn't Jews. Right? It was by Presbyterians or some other group. I don't even know what the 2 groups were. They're just Christian groups persecuting each other. So the Founding Fathers knew this system all too well, and they were sick of it, and they didn't like it. 2 examples. Thomas Jefferson wrote to his nephew and said, if you can find that there is some greater being, so much the better for you. But if you can't find that, then try to live your life by the lights of reason and blah, blah, blah. And so he wasn't coming out and saying there's not a God. He was just saying, if you are looking for God and don't find him, then just sit back and relax and go forward with your life and don't worry about the subject. Now that's a very weird thing to say if he was a believer. Perhaps he wasn't a believer. Maybe he's one of the ones that you say was a Unitarian or something. And then there's Benjamin Franklin, who gave donations to all the churches in Philadelphia, or various of them, and made no favorites about it, and wanted all religions to be able to preach. And he built a church, or was involved in paying for a church, that allowed different denominations to preach. And he said, verily, even if a Mohammedan came to Philadelphia, we would allow him to stand at the pulpit and say his bits. Now, the Muslims are perhaps more dangerous than Benjamin Franklin. He was trying to be very open-minded when he said that, but when he wrote that. But perhaps he didn't know how bad Muslims were. But even if that's the case, we should allow the Muslims to say anything they want except for incitement to violence. All right, so yeah, the Founding Fathers could not come out and say, there's not a God, I'm an atheist. Because they would be ruined in polite society. To this day, you cannot be a politician in America and not believe in God, or you can't be elected president anyway. Things are changing a bit, I know. But back then, no, polite society, you had to attend church. You had to go on Sunday. You had to be polite at church. You had to get along with people. And that's just the way it was. There was no breathing room for somebody to not be religious. And yet our founding fathers spoke against religion. They wrote laws that allowed us to not be religious if we choose not to be. Laws that were not in place before. It used to be the case that you had to go to church on the Sabbath or else you would be in big trouble and stuff like this. And this system that we have today is because of those men that did not, as I say, did not believe in God or did not find it convincing. Some of them were on the border, but some of them were deists. A lot of them were deists. All right. All believed in a higher power. No, that's not true. God mentioned in the Declaration of Independence is not connected with any particular faith and is not mentioned in the Constitution. Right. Not mentioned in the Constitution. This is not a Christian nation. Okay. The separation of church and state was to prevent a state religion. True. To allow citizens to worship freely as they pleased. True. Or not at all. True. Yes. It was a nation started by unbelievers, for unbelievers, and that grain has grown, and this is the only safe place on the planet for unbelievers. If you're in Europe, you have to believe in multiculturalism and green environmentalism, or else you will be put in jail. If you put comments online saying Muslim immigration is dangerous and environmentalism is nonsense, they will put you in jail. They will fine you, they will ruin your life, you'll lose your job. Okay? You cannot be an unbeliever anywhere on the planet except America. It's the only place that's free. And you'll say Switzerland and Japan, and you'll say that there's other places, fine. Excuse me. Pardon me. Also, can you expound on these Bronze Age myths you seem obsessed with? Okay. Well, do you know that Theseus was born out of a slit in his mother's side? Do you know that Tectoclotl, the Aztec god, was a mote of gold dust that floated down from the sky, and his mother embraced him into her bosom, and that was born their god? Oh, so many gods are born of virgins. And what is it about the female birth canal that's so repulsive to religions? I don't know, but it's a constant refrain. So many gods are born of virgins, and you can watch, there's a documentary called The God Who Was Not There, I believe. Very good, excellent documentary done by some sort of amateur. And it lists things like all the gods who are born of virgins, or born out of a slit in their mother's side, or born from some way besides the way that we know people are born. So Jesus is just another one of those. He's nothing special about him. He's number 26 or something like that. There were lots of people born of virgins. It was a thing back then. So let's go to Acts 17. And in the Bible, King James Version. Now when they had passed through Amphipolis and Apollonia, they came to Thessalonica, where was a synagogue of the Jews. And Paul in his manner went in unto them, and 3 Sabbath days reasoned with them out of the Scriptures. He reasoned with them. Now that is a vestige of Greek culture, because reason was derided later, and nowadays there are strains in the church that would have you believe that intellectuals will lead you astray, and you should only listen to and be around the material that the church okays. So there are strains of Greece, ancient Greece, in Christianity, and I'll tell you now, they are the best bits and the only good bits. Going on just a bit here. Opening and alleging that Christ must needs have suffered and risen again from the dead, and that this Jesus, whom I preach unto you, is Christ. Okay. So not only did he rise from the dead, But he is the one that the Jews have in their scriptures telling them that he's going to come and all this. He's the one. He didn't just rise from the dead. He's the one they're looking for. Okay? Well, that's a little strange because rising from the dead was just a thing. Okay? It wasn't a big deal. It happened a lot. All right? Jesus was just one of them. Lots of people rose from the dead. All the graves in Jerusalem opened up and people walked around at night. So this was not a big deal. So he has to convince them not just that Jesus rose from the dead, which was just, that's no big deal. You can go to Shopko and get that. Well, Jesus is the Christ. He's the one the Jews are looking for. You see? This is why I dismiss it as Bronze Age myths. Because it's frickin' nonsense. It's so much nonsense by ignorant people. The only person who could believe this nonsense is someone who's having it read to them from some authority on a pulpit. And the person who's having it read to them can't read for themselves anyway. They're illiterate. They're completely ignorant. That's the only type of person who'd be convinced by this stuff. So as soon as they printed the Bible and started reading it for themselves all across Europe, religions just started falling to pieces. And it was 100 years later that the United States was formed. So that's why I dismiss it as Bronze Age myths. All right, let me go on a little bit and see if there's more she has to say down here. She says, I don't know anyone of faith who thinks that practicing their beliefs is fun and comfortable. Ooh, well, okay. So I would agree then that religion is not fun and comfortable. I wonder what you're after with it then. So it doesn't bring you fun or comfort. That's interesting because listen to what she says in just a minute here. Where do you get that from? What you call a myth is a way of life to many. I'm sorry you're experiencing being chained, but it's arrogant for you to place your burden on others. Oh boy, and let me skip a few sentences because I want to get to this one here. We see happiness as coming and going, with joy being the permanent state that sustains us. Okay, so let's see. Where do you get that from, that faith is practicing your beliefs? I don't know anyone of faith who thinks practicing their beliefs is fun and comfortable. We see happiness as coming and going, with joy being our permanent state that sustains us. I don't know anyone who thinks practicing their beliefs is fun and comfortable. Joy is the permanent state that sustains us. Okay? So there's some sort of weird dissonance in her brain. She doesn't have any freaking clue what she's saying. She says one sentence and then 2 minutes later she says another sentence that is the opposite of what she's saying. So I don't know how much I should or could address. Okay, you don't think that religion's fun and comfortable, but it sustains you through a constant feeling of joy. What do you want me to address? How crazy are you? So then she says, crazies and wackos abound right now, and that claim to be believers have always been around, and that claim to be believers, they've always been around. Well, if the shoe fits, wear it. Christians are commanded to love our neighbor as ourselves. Are you then commanded to love? Isn't that great? Yeah. How does that work? Does that go well? I know it doesn't. I know that the religious people are some of the worst vermin on the planet. Okay? So you're not going to get anywhere saying that you command your people to love, or your people are commanded to love by some authority, and it doesn't work. I can see it doesn't work. You rape children. Okay? So you're commanded to love. You're not suspicious of that? You don't think you should choose love freely of your own accord? You're commanded to love? What a ridiculous thing. This is a way of life that we frequently fail at. Here we're going to get into the sin thing, aren't we? We are called to glorify God by enjoying Him forever. A nonsense sentence. A word salad sentence. We are called to glorify God by enjoying Him forever. Total nonsense. The difference from Judaism and Islam is that our Savior Jesus is living. Right? Because He was resurrected. And He floated up into heaven. So He's alive. What do you mean? Is Bronze Age myths? This is stupid stuff. Oh my God. He is living, and we are saved by faith alone. Saved from what? When you die, it's over. There's no heaven, there's no hell, and there's no being saved. So there's no such, this idea of being saved or not saved is just floaty, hooty-dooty nonsense from the Bronze Age. It's nonsense. Okay, we are saved by faith alone, not by following ceremonial laws. We are commanded to love our neighbors as ourselves. We are not saved by following ceremonial laws. Weird, huh? Yeah, I know. Okay, fine. It's not a ceremonial law, perhaps, right? Oh, my goodness. We are flawed human beings susceptible to sin. Now, the way I look at that is, there's a million ways to do any given thing, like cook your steak for dinner, right? You could pour some motor oil on your steak. That's wrong. You could pour cyanide on your steak. That's wrong. You could put a bunch of pins and glass in your steak. That's wrong. Or you could season it with a bit of salt and pepper and make sure it's medium to medium well. Medium rare, maybe, if that's where you go. I think that rare steaks smell like slaughterhouses, so I don't like the taste of that. But cyanide or glass would be stupid. But there's a million ways to cook your steak. It's just that there aren't very many right ways. There's tons and tons of wrong ways to cook your steak that'll kill you. There aren't very many right ways to cook your steak that'll do it. So when you say that there's a way we have to behave in reality, I say we need to use our brain to figure that out. You have nothing to decide whether or not something's good or not. You have no way. And obviously you have no idea, Sherry, because you are saying one sentence 1 minute and the opposite 2 minutes later, and this is your core beliefs, I guess. Here's an interesting one. Okay, so we're susceptible to sin, you say. I don't think that's sin to do something that ruins your life or hurts you. I think that that's bad for you, and you shouldn't do it because you don't want your life to be ruined and you don't want to be hurt. So there's no such thing as sin. There's only doing things that are good for you or stupid things that will hurt you. Those are the only two types of things there are in the world. All right. We have a certain belief, we live a certain way, and we are told we will be persecuted. Now back to the fact that this is just Greece. This is ancient Greece that you're talking about here. So when you're told you will be persecuted, you're just reiterating Greek myths. I can't remember. What's the name of the Greek goddess who was persecuted? Oh, let's see. She was told that she would know the future and that nobody would ever believe her. Right? And so everybody in society all through history has felt like they know what's going on and they know what's right, and everybody around them is punishing them for that. Right? And the Christians have just picked this up from Greek mythology, and they've put it in their religion, and it's just a piece of Greek culture in your religion. So you've been told you'll be persecuted, and everybody in the world has that feeling. So, Christians are no different than anybody else, she says. True. Many in other countries are now being persecuted. Yes, true. We are, although we want to share our faith, it can't be forced on anyone. That is what you say because you live in a secular nation. So I don't think that that's going to last for long. I think that you guys are going to start trying to force your faith on Muslims, or you're going to become Muslims because Islam forces its faith on others. And the only reason you're not forcing your faith on anybody is because of the First Amendment. So I don't give you guys a single iota of credit. I mean, I grew up under the Mormon Church in Utah, and they put their boot on people's face as much as they could, without the government coming in and doing something. And the government comes in and does stuff all the time in Utah to try to stop them from marrying kids and marrying multiple wives, and they won't stop. They won't stop. Oh, so they do use force. Faith is forced on little girls that are married into marriages they don't want to be married into. Bullshit, you don't force it on people. Bullshit. I don't expect you to believe any of this, and you are rather condescending, but I still see you as a fellow human being worthy of love and respect. Well, ditto. Even if you don't seem to respect anyone's beliefs but your own. Yeah, I think everybody needs to also do that. Okay? You need to also do that. You need to think things through for yourself. And everybody outside of your brain, whatever they say, you need to just say, I'll accept that as soon as I understand and believe it, and not before. You should never believe or accept anything that you don't come to conclude on your own. Yes, that's true. I think you are confusing the concept of religion with actual faith, and though America is a secular country, we are guaranteed the right to worship as we see fit. Thank you to our non-religious founding fathers for that. I liked Hitch, but I like his brother better. Peter Hitchens, God Does Exist, and then there's a link to a video. I like Christopher Hitchens, and I listened to Peter Hitchens, and I went, it's a bunch of hogwash. He doesn't have anything of substance to say, and especially when they're on stage together, he is a particularly mealy-mouthed nothing burger. So, yeah, we just have a huge bunch of differences. I think for myself, and you, Sherry, accept what other people say, and you think that there are authorities out there who know more than you and know better than you, and I don't think there's anybody on this planet who knows more than me or better than me. So that is where we differ pretty strongly, I guess.